السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على محمد النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم واجعلنا منهم، اللهم آمين. Inshallah, today we will be talking about development in the war in Gaza, about what was described as the three stages or the third stage of war by the Zionist authorities. But I want to emphasize that this talk is a little different from previous talks, because there is a potential, which is a very good potential, that this is a turning point on the war on Gaza. That as of this past week, we might be observing a turning point on the war on Gaza, and I will inshallah explain the details and why this could be the turning point in the war that has been ongoing since October of last year. First of all, what we need to understand is the major development happened when Hamas submitted its response to the Biden proposal. And some of you might remember that we talked about this before, that Biden, President of the US, took a proposal that was given to him by Netanyahu. It's important to know this, that the Biden proposal was given to the US by Netanyahu. So this is Netanyahu's proposal. What Biden did, he put his name on it and announced it, and took a step further. He went to the UN Security Council and got a resolution to adopt this Biden proposal. All the countries in the Security Council, 14 of them, voted for it, except Russia. Russia abstained. It could have used the veto, which would really nullify the proposal, but it did not. It just objected. And this aspect that I am talking about, this is not my analysis. This is not my guess. Usually when I give you an opinion, I tell you, this is what I think. This is my opinion. But this is a fact, that the US from day one said this proposal came from Netanyahu. And the language, what got Russia not to support it, because the language was not the language that would have been 100% agreeable to Hamas, since it did not talk explicitly about the war ending. It was vague. Each one can understand from it whatever you like. So this is sometimes that you give an answer to a question, and whoever is sitting can take whatever they like from the answer. And this was the proposal, basically, that there will be a ceasefire. It would last for a few weeks, initial stage, at which Hamas would release hostages, 30, 35, whatever, in this regard. And the Israelis will come in with a list to release from the Palestinian prisoners. It's similar to what took place last November. If you remember, last November, US brokered a deal with Qatar and Egypt, where there was a lull in the fighting for a few weeks. There was no fighting. And basically, there was a release of Israeli hostages and of Palestinian prisoners. But the fighting resumed because the Israelis insist on resuming the fighting. So this first stage is similar to the November. But then there will be negotiation discussing the future of this war. And if you remember a few months back, Hamas insisted that they will not start a ceasefire unless the Zionists' government agreed to end the war. So that was a precondition that Hamas said they have to agree to ending the war before we start the ceasefire and before we start releasing the hostages. However, Hamas came and was flexible on this point. This was a few weeks back, that we are willing to talk about stopping the war, not in the first stage. So basically, we'll have the first stage. We will release some of the hostages. The Israelis will release some of the prisoners, and we'll talk. By this time, the Israelis do not need to commit to ending the war. So that was a flexibility that Hamas have shown. That flexibility got Netanyahu on the spot because initially Netanyahu was thinking that Hamas will say no. But they came and said yes. And he started, of course, playing with words and his typical games and so on and so forth. But this week, Hamas came with a solid proposal in this regard. And there was really high hopes in Washington, D.C., and Qatar, and Egypt, and among the bulk of the Zionists in the Palestine, with the exception of the extreme right and many of the Jews, and I distinguish between the Jews and the Zionists, as we discussed before, that this is really it. We have been waiting for this point, and this point has come. And there were many attempts before that failed. There were many attempts for a ceasefire from the beginning, before Ramadan, during Ramadan, after Ramadan, and all of them have failed. Basically, because Hamas insisted on that condition, we will not have a ceasefire negotiation until the Israelis commit to ending the war with US, Qatar, and Turkey guarantees, and so on and so forth, and Egyptian guarantees. And the Netanyahu government will not go for it. But the indication now that this is Netanyahu's proposal, with that vague part, as we mentioned, so basically that's what created the high hopes that, okay, yeah, Hamas is agreeing to this Netanyahu, i.e. Biden proposal in this regard. And until 2 weeks ago, the thinking in Washington and in Qatar, in Egypt, among the people in Hamas and among the Israeli government, that there's not much of a hope for a ceasefire. It's dying. The possibility is dying. We do not see any prospect. Until this week, that Hamas came with this solid proposal that yes, we can talk about ceasefire, we can talk about releasing the hostages without the Zionists committing themselves to ending the war in the first stage, but we will discuss it after the first stage. There were some things that, we would need some guarantees, and the negotiation can continue indefinitely, which the Zionists said, no, we will not accept indefinite. This has to be addressed, and so on and so forth. And you have seen in the media, Western media and the Israeli media, not to mention media in general, that the prospect for a ceasefire is really very high, and we have not seen this for many, many months. And it became clear that dynamics of the war of Gaza have changed. Why even Netanyahu would accept this proposal, which is his proposal. He submitted it, hoping that Hamas will not accept it. I mean, he submitted to the Biden administration, hoping that Hamas would not accept it, because Hamas insisted there's one position that's not negotiable, which is to end the war. So he thought, yeah, they will reject it, and I'll be safe within Israel, because there is lots of pressure to do something, and now I can say that Hamas is not accepting. You see, I'm very flexible. Hamas is not accepting, but Hamas did accept, and that put him on the spot. We'll talk about something that happened this evening, Sunday evening, Jerusalem time, inshallah. We'll discuss this development, but let me just talk about why the Israeli government, those Zionists, the extreme right, Netanyahu and company, felt that there is a change in the dynamics. Now, each one took it on their own. For example, the Ibn Ghafir and Smotrich, those who are the extreme right, those who wants to expel people of Palestine from the West Bank, send them to Jordan, and expel the people of Gaza and send them to Egypt, and flood the West Bank and Gaza with settlements. Ibn Ghafir made it clear, I'm gonna live in a settlement in Gaza. So he's preparing from now to establish settlements in Gaza, and he wants to live in a settlement. So Smotrich and Ibn Ghafir and their 14 seats in parliament, they have not changed their position. However, they showed some flexibility. They showed some flexibility in what? Smotrich is the finance minister. So he said a few weeks back that there will be a restriction on the Israeli banks to deal with the Palestinian banks. This restriction will kill the Palestinian banking sector, no doubt about it. Because the bulk of the Palestinian banks are local, with the exception of two banks, Bank al-Qahira Amman, which Cairo Amman, and Al-Bank al-Arabi. Those two banks have connection, one in Cairo, one in Jordan, and other Arab countries. But the rest of the banks are local, so if such a decision is taken, it will kill the banking sector. Few days back, this week, he announced that, no, I'm gonna extend this relationship. So that's something that was a compromise on their part. Usually they do not ever compromise on anything. Then came another compromise on his part, that's the finance minister. He announced 2 weeks ago or so that he's gonna take the money that belonged to the Palestinian Authority, which is in their hand. They basically collect the money on taxes and on boards, and give it to the Palestinian Authority to run their affairs. So this money in the hands of the finance minister Smotrich, he announced that he's gonna take this money and give it to the Jewish family who were affected by October 7, and give it to the Jewish family who were removed from the Gaza settlements. They're living in hotels. And give it to Jewish families who have left the north because of Hezbollah attacks, and they live in the south. And there's a substantial number of those people who are now, they cannot go to their homes. So he said he's gonna take the money of the PA and give it to those people. And there was an outrage, of course, by the Palestinian Authority, because it's broke financially. They always complain about finance, but now it's more serious. Imagine, there used to be 200 Palestinians in the West Bank who go and work within the Israeli part of beyond the wall. And those people from October 7 until now, they did not do any work. So basically, some of those who are professional in building, they were paid like $4,000 a month. And suddenly they have zero income. The bulk get about $100 a day, $150 a day. So imagine those 200,000, how much money they were bringing to the Palestinian Authority. And they move the so-called economy in Palestine. There's not much of an economy, but basically they use the services, they use the whatever, buy things, and they get things ongoing. This is no longer the case. And the Israelis are taking this money and give it to the Jews and basically it was on the verge of saying that the Palestinian Authority is collapsing. So Smotrich came and reversed himself and said, I'm going to give the money to Abbas people. And again, because he realized the Palestinian Authority will collapse, and he said, this is not good for us. And it's clear for those who know the ins and the outs that the Palestinian Authority is the policeman for the Jews in Palestine, for those Zionist government. So basically, any Palestinian that need to be arrested in the West Bank, they would call the Abbas people and they will arrest him and give him to the Israelis. Other cases where, for a reason or other, the Abbas people cannot arrest, let's say somebody have connection within Fatah, within this PA, they will say, well, why don't you do it yourself? So again, the Israelis will invade a city and they take whoever they want. So as a result, I said they did some compromises in this regard because they felt the danger coming. So going back to what happened this evening, the Prime Minister office have issued red lines. And those things have created a backlash within the political establishment. As only of yesterday, the president have said there is an absolute majority among the Israelis in support of a ceasefire and getting the hostages back. He said absolute majority, meaning the bulk of the Zionists and the Jews and Palestine are in support of an agreement with Hamas to have a ceasefire, start negotiation for the final stage, and get the hostages, or at least some of them, out. He said absolute majority. And usually, the president in Israel does not interfere with politics. He's usually a figurehead. He go and receive people, he invited, go visit other countries, meet head of state when people come, but he has no serious role. He does, after elections, appoint someone to take the first shot at being prime minister. So the fact that he is getting into this, it means that they are getting impatient with the tricks of Netanyahu. But Netanyahu, again, will go back to his old ways. And that's what brought those red lines that came tonight. But a question would come, why we would see this change in the attitude of the Israelis that, yeah, we can have a ceasefire and we can discuss later ending the war and all of these things. What had happened? What took place? There were some changes. Because until a few months back, until a few months back, this is not something that the Israeli government would entertain, giving a proposal and talking about these things. What took place is that Israel is really losing the war. And this is not an understatement. And this is not an overstatement at the same time. They are losing the war, and we can talk about this from different angles. The bulk of those who are fighting in Gaza are reserve soldiers, which means he's a bakery, he's a software development, this guy is an Uber driver, this guy is a medical doctor, this girl is a nurse, this girl is the homemaker, this and that. Those are regular people. They work regularly, and suddenly they are called to serve in Gaza. And their service have been extended once and twice, and now they are extending it more. So basically, there's not the regular income. There's this burden on those people, on their families, on their companies. Now imagine, a company when you have 20% of its staff, software development company, they are in Gaza. So basically there's not much work that can be achieved. when you have 15–20% of your staff fighting in Gaza and coming back dead or injured or crazy. I mean, we have seen signs of fatigue. 900 of those officers have already resigned, saying we do not want to be in the army anymore. Those are not reserve, those are regular soldiers. We have seen quite good number who are saying we are not going to go back to serve, even if it means jails for us. We have seen horrible things and we will not go back. Haaretz have stories of a few of them that we mentioned last week. To remind you, one of them said, the army told me to scorch 3 residential buildings, just put them on fire. He said, I will not go back to do these things. Another one said, I have observed the planes bombing the civilian areas and blocks, and so many people are dead. So many kids are dead. There is no distinguish between somebody who's a Hamas or somebody who's just a civilian. And so he said, I'm not going to go back. So Haaretz have some of those stories. Now, this had also implicated itself on the economy itself. The economy is suffering. They had to borrow money. Remember, just before October 7, there was this talk that, we are economically so viable that we are now have the strongest this and the strongest that, and we are very advanced in starts up and technology behind the US, and we are this, we are that. Talks about those Israelis enjoying their time on the beaches with lots of money, while the Palestinians are suffering on the other side, and they did not care what's happening in Palestine because basically they have it all. They are traveling, have lots of money, go to Egypt and Morocco and Europe and the US for vacation and this and this and that. All of this have evaporated. All of this have evaporated. But one of the most important point is a New York Times article. A New York Times article that basically said the New York Times met with few generals. Those are high-ranking people in the army. The ones that we talk about, Haaretz meeting some of those people, they were regular soldiers. But the New York Times said high level, those generals in charge, somebody have hundreds of people under them and this and that. So those generals are telling the New York Times, the top echelon of the Israeli army wants to end the war, even if Hamas stays in charge in Gaza. So let me repeat this. That the New York Times is saying that talking to high-ranking generals in the Israeli army, they told the New York Times that the army wants this war to end. We want to conclude this war, even if Hamas stays in power in Gaza. And that was shocking. So now we have the political, wing of this war, which is Netanyahu and Gallant, who are not in agreement on many of the issues. And then on the other side, the defense minister, that is. And on the other side is the army generals who are saying we want to end this war. And Netanyahu came and said this will never happen. And he made that statement, is Israel an army with a country, or are we a country with an army? Meaning, is the army in charge and running this country, and the country is just like a farm for them running it, deciding what to do? Or are we just like a regular country that has an army that abides by the rules and by the decision of the political establishment? So that was very important indication. And as a result, we have seen some of these statements coming from Netanyahu that talking about the third stage of the war. He said, we're going to start the third stage of the war soon. And we will move the soldiers from Gaza to the north, meaning to the borders with Lebanon. And there was a 10-day period or so. When I say 10-day, it's like 11, 12, or 9. It's around 10-day period where we discussed here, and the media was all over the place, that war with Lebanon is imminent. And we have seen, Western countries calling their people, citizens, to leave Lebanon, starting with Canada. Arab countries, starting with Kuwait, then Saudi. We have seen European countries calling their citizens to leave. We have seen the US saying we are getting ready to evacuate our people if the chances of the war. There was a period when it was thought that Netanyahu will start a war in the north. Although the political establishment in Israel, they said this is suicidal. This is crazy. Because if this thing happened, Hezbollah have 150,000 of those missiles, different ranges. They can reach any place in Palestine, any place in historic Palestine in this regard. And Hezbollah have produced a video of 10 minutes where basically they send a drone where it scanned the areas where they have military manufacturing. They have important manufacturing areas. They have important places that are military based, and so on and so forth. And they said that basically, if war starts, those things will be gone. At that point, the Zionists start talking about we're going to use not our typical weapons. What they meant is they will use nuclear weapons. It got to that point. And as I said, in that hype of about 10 days, the thought was it's going to happen. And the Biden administration and Macron and others jumped on Netanyahu. Stop. Don't even start. Don't even try. And this and this and that. And suddenly the de-escalation happened. So now the war on Lebanon is not really coming. The low-scale skirmishes between Hezbollah and the Israelis will continue. But this is controlled. The UN have put it in that fashion. The politicians in the West say, yeah, this is controlled. You just throw a few missiles, or if the Israelis kill a commander, throw 100 and 200 small-scale missiles and start some fires and kill some people. That's how it has been going for 9 months, and it will continue like this. So the war on Lebanon now is not an option. It's off. And that statement by Netanyahu of that we're going to move the army to the north was really very, very alarming, and that's what got those countries to evacuate. And the thing is, the funny thing in this regard, and sometimes شر البلية ما يضحك. So there was this post that Saudi is calling upon its citizens to leave Lebanon. And the Yemeni Houthis are calling on its citizens in Lebanon to go to the south to fight with Hezbollah. So did you get this? So they said that the Saudis are calling upon their citizens to leave Lebanon. And the Yemeni Houthis are calling on the Yemeni citizens in Lebanon to go south and fight with Hezbollah. So they were saying, this is us and this is them. Somebody said the propaganda, that can be. But the point needs to be mentioned. So in this regard, we have seen those factors that took shape that got Netanyahu to start thinking there's too much pressure from the hostage families. There's too much pressure from the Western countries. There's too much pressure from the opposition. But he has withstand all these challenges all along. He has his ways. And more than once, his coalition was being threatened. At one point, the Shas people want an agreement by the coalition to vote in the Knesset to give the Shas people the authority to appoint local rabbis. So let's say that this area will have a rabbi, that instead of the locality, this Raleigh or this county or this to appoint, there will be a central, which means that they will have plenty of money coming to Shas party. And in fact, Netanyahu have contacted even Arab parties to vote for it because he knows some of his people in the Likud are against it. But there was a revolt within the Likud party, and Netanyahu have to withdraw this agreement between him and the Shas people. And they got very, very upset. Another one came is a Supreme Court decision that obliged the army to draft the Haredi, the very religious people who study the Talmud. As we mentioned before, there is a sector, they are about 15% of the population. They do not work. They do not work at all. They have no contact with the outside world. They have no radios. They have no TVs. They do not know what is going on outside of their circle. And this is a very close-knit community. Their time is studying the Talmud all the day. They just study. And they basically tell the government that it's our study that's protecting the state of Israel, not your army. God is protecting us because of our study. Those people live on government money. So each one has a salary. And each one has 12, 13, 14 children. If you want to know to what extent those people are isolated, the BBC 3 days ago had an interview with one of them on NPR. At night, NPR shift to the BBC. So they had an interview with one of those religious women from the Haredi crowd. And she said that it was only after her 4th child with a few miscarriages, so she was like in her late 20s, mid-30s, what have you. She said that I learned then that there is a birth control bill. Imagine somebody who's living in the 21st century in Israel, which is saying we are the most advanced this and the most advanced this, and said that it was late in her midlife that she learned there's a birth control bill. So she went to her husband, who is studying the Talmud, does not do any work, and she said there is a birth control bill. He said, what? Her husband, who's a little older than her, has no idea there is a birth control bill. She said, we are living totally in isolation of the society. We have our own people that we socialize with, our own network. We do not listen to radio. We do not have a radio. We do not listen to TV. We do not have a TV. We do not interact with the secular world. They buy from their own people stuff in their communities. They have their own villages and cities. Basically, they do not interact with the rest of the population. Those are the people that we are talking about. Yesterday, this chief rabbi of among the Shas people have issued a fatwa, in our terms, a fatwa, saying any yeshiva student, those who study the Talmud, who enlist in the army is a kafir. He said, they have those, in fact, New York has those yeshiva students too. So in New York, the same thing. If you remember, just shifting gears, about 3-4 years ago, the New York police and FBI and ATF and all those people have issued this study, or I should say investigation results that lasted for more than a year. and basically ended up in arresting 70 rabbis who have been milking the government and the state of money through those people. So they come to you, you have 13 children, and they will do fake papers and fake this and fake that and get hundreds of millions of dollars. This is the same. And of course, you have the typical, Israeli politicians, and in the US, I call them Israeli politicians because they are not really American politicians. They are working full-time for the Israel regardless of the best interest of the US. And they came to the media and justify, those people are coming from Eastern Europe. They are used to this culture. They live, they do not work. They live on this and welfare and this and this and that to justify this. This is exactly the same phenomenon that we are talking about. And they consider themselves going out of this circle a threat to the Jewish faith, a threat to the Jewish identity, a threat to themselves, and of course, follow the money, a threat to their big, fat checks that those rabbis get. That's what explained this fatwa by this Shas rabbi, that any yeshiva student who went and enlisted in the army, he is an infidel. That's his term. Because no one should go out of this circle. Now, I just want to get you to understand what is it that we are talking about. Imagine the group that come for Fajr prayer here. They come for Fajr prayer, they go home, get the breakfast, and then they go to this institute and spend the whole day talking about Talmud, Torah, and studying. By end of the day, they go home, do their prayers, do their families, go to sleep. The second day, repeat this, and have no contact absolutely whatsoever with the outside world. This lady that was interviewed with the BBC, she left. She said the advertisement for it, she went from covering her whole body to be in charge of a company for lingerie. Lingerie is basically the women's under, clothes. They went from one extreme to the other. But she said, the moment that I left, I had no one in the world to talk to, because all the people that I have known through my life, or all my life, are in this circle. This will explain this fatwa. Because the moment that this soldier goes in the army, he will interact with the secularists. He might eat food that is not kosher. He might end up in Gaza dealing with people from Gaza and dealing with others. And that's a danger, because the moment that he gets out of that circle, of course, he sees life in this regard. And those people are making it on condition on Netanyahu, we want to be exempted. However, Netanyahu cannot get the Likud party and his coalition to agree on this. Gallant, the defense minister, is absolutely against it. He said we need to start enlisting those people. However, Netanyahu cannot fire Gallant. Remember, before October 7, there was a movement in the government, in Netanyahu and his coalition, right wing, to change the rules in the country so that the politicians have the final word. Throughout its history, the Israelis did not adopt a constitution. So Israel has no constitution. Whatever people in power, who have the majority in the Knesset, they will run the country. They can make whatever decision that they want. However, there's an entity that can overrule them, which is the Supreme Court. So, for example, this past week, there's a case that went all the way to Supreme Court for many, many years. Some Jewish settlers took over a Waqf house that belonged to the Haredi family in Jerusalem. And basically, the government did not do anything. The only discourse is if you do not want to go and fight and kill and be killed, go to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, indeed, this belongs to Al-Khaldi family. And they asked police to evict those settlers. So the Supreme Court can overrule the Prime Minister. And the government have tried to change this rule. They passed a law through the Knesset, and it was almost getting close to be implemented when Gantz, Gallant, Gantz and the head of the opposition, when Gallant, the defense minister, said, we need to take it easy with this and not push it, and Netanyahu fired him. This was about a year ago or so. At that point, the whole country came to a standstill. The airport stopped working, the hospitals stopped working, transportation stopped working, and Netanyahu had to bend and bring Gallant back to be defense minister. Because they thought that he's becoming an Arab leader, like Sisi and King Abdullah and Mordechai, son of Zaydun in Abu Dhabi, and Mordechai, son of Solomon in Saudi. You have the final say. So they stood their ground. The country just came to a standstill, and he had to put Gallant back. That's why the relationship with Gallant is very tense. And still, until today, if he have the choice, he will fire him, but he can't. So given all of those circumstances, Netanyahu felt the pressure, and he need to compromise. But there is a problem. There is a problem with compromise. Netanyahu has no problem with compromising. He has no problem, he's not like Smotrich and Ibn Ghafir. Those are ideologically motivated and based. Netanyahu is also ideologically motivated, but he looks for his own interest first. He looks for his own interest first. And he have a problem with the court. He's being accused of corruption. He was indicted on corruption. So if he leave the prime minister office, he will go to jail. Spending a few years in jail. He's in his 70s. This guy, as of last year, I am the most this and the most that. I am the one who secure Israel. I am the one who is the protector of the Jewish people. I am the one who is doing all of this for Israel. I have brought the Arabs to normalize and all of this, and he kept talking about his achievement. And of course, he was flying very, very high. And he had the right to, because he have done all the service for the state. And of course, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bil-mirsad, Allah has his own way, October 7 flipped this upside down. So now he becomes the outcast in Israel. That the majority of the people think he should leave politics. But he has the majority in Knesset. And the people who are protecting him are the far right. If he now will go with this Hamas proposal, the Hamas response, what will happen? Smotrich and Ibn Ghafir will bring the government down. The religious parties have no issue. Shas and the United Torah Party, they already supported ceasefire with Hamas. So those religious Jews have no problem. It's the Zionists that is the problem. So Shas, which is a religious party that usually have 10 or so seats in the Knesset, and they are mostly, by the way, Arab Jews. Many of them are Moroccans. I think Dar'i came from Morocco anyway, the head of this. And he was indicted and he was in jail for a while, by the way, in this regard. So this is typical, of those Zionists. Just follow the money and you will see how much corruption is there. Netanyahu is being indicted on corruption, bribes, and so on and so forth. So the religious Jews are saying, we are for the ceasefire. The problem is those extreme Zionists, Ibn Ghafir, Smotrich, and the 14 seats that they have in the Knesset. On the other side, the opposition came and told Netanyahu, we will vote with you. If there's a ceasefire, those guys, 14 seats you're going to lose, we will support you and we will pass this resolution. But of course, Netanyahu said, he knows, yeah, they will support him. The resolution will be passed, and then each one will get his knife. The knives will come, and they start the planning to get rid of him. He knows that. He's not stupid. That's what got him to produce the document tonight from his office. Look at how is khabith. This guy is a fox. This guy, you cannot imagine the amount of lies that he gives in a day, not to talk about in a week. Lies all the time. So to keep his coalition intact, he came with red lines tonight. Now, think about it. He already sent the head of the Mossad for the negotiation last week with Hamas and the people and with Qatar and the US and Egypt and mediators. So he already sent him. But then he did not trust him, so he sent his own advisor after him. He said, I want to know what's being discussed. So he does not even trust the head of the Mossad. Mossad is the Israeli intelligence for outside the country. Shabak is the Israeli intelligence for inside the country. Shabak is equivalent to the FBI. Mossad is equivalent to the CIA. So Gallant wants to have a meeting with the head of the Shabak and the head of the Mossad. And Netanyahu said, no, you can't. I am the prime minister. You are not. If there's a meeting with those people, I need to be the head. He said, I do not want to be the last one that you give me the results at the end. Because he does not trust anybody. He does not trust anybody. Except his wife and his son. And I mean it. He does not trust the people in the Likud, because some of them are plotting against him. He does not trust Ibn Gfir or Smotrich. He's using them, and they know that he's using them. But they are also using him. They are also using him. Now, why do I say he only trusts his wife and his son? Because once in a while, you get statements coming to the media from his wife or from his son. And this really expresses his own opinion of the events. His son came 2 days ago and said that the prosecutor, meaning the one who is going to prosecute Netanyahu on these things, and he keep going after him because the court is ongoing, and the Supreme Court are destroying the country. Well, they are not destroying the country, they are destroying your dad. They are not destroying the country, but this is what he conveyed. This is Yair, Netanyahu, who's living in Miami with tons of money being spent to protect him. His wife came 3 weeks ago in a meeting with the hostage family and said the army apparatus in Israel are plotting a coup against my husband. Again, what's the source of this news? It's Netanyahu. So he does not trust any politicians. Those who are close advisors to him, once in a while he sends them and get their opinion, but basically he only trusts his wife and his son because he knows that anybody can sell him anytime, except of course his wife and his son. That's what explains some of those outrageous statements that come sometimes from his son and bring a big mess in the media. So what are those red lines that he issued tonight? He's saying that the war has to continue until we achieve our objectives. That's the first red line. Now, what are the objectives? We have to eliminate Hamas. That's one. We have to get all the hostages back. That's two. And then we have to de-radicalize Gaza. Meaning we have to re-educate the people of Gaza so that they can see Israel as a friend. They are our cousins. They are our buddies. They are not our enemies. Those are the three objectives that he started in October of last year. Although the bulk of the politicians in Israel, the bulk of the US and Western Europe statements saying basically finishing Hamas is not an option. In fact, the official statement of the Israeli army is that Hamas cannot be eliminated. This was public. Official statement, Hamas cannot be eliminated. They said this is an idea deep-rooted in the hearts of the people, and this you cannot eliminate. You can weaken them, you can do this and this and that, but don't talk about finishing them and eliminating them. So his red line is we have to eliminate Hamas. He knows that this cannot be done. Now, how do I say this? Because after the army mentioned this statement and Netanyahu was outraged at the army, he sent his own advisor for a conference, and his own advisor in the conference said, Hamas cannot be eliminated. And he will not say it without the permission of Netanyahu. But he have to stand against the army with that statement. He have to pretend that, no, it can't be eliminated. We can do it. He made that commitment. But then when he sent his advisor, and this advisor exactly repeat the same sentence, and the Israeli media was ridiculing him, saying, how could you object to this statement 2 days ago, and then you send your advisor? Because he knows that we have to prepare the Israeli public for this reality. We cannot eliminate Hamas. But meanwhile, I'm going to keep talking about eliminating Hamas. And you know you cannot do it. American journalists, American politicians, American this are saying, you cannot. Israeli army says, you cannot. His own advisor goes out and says, you cannot, which means Netanyahu believes he cannot eliminate Hamas. So that's the first red line. Now, why he is saying this? He needs to please Ibn Gfir and Smotrich. Saying, look, we are talking to Hamas, and we are sending our own people, and we are doing this, we are close to this. However, I am on the same principles. We have to eliminate Hamas. So he says this to make the extreme right wing pleased. Again, I said the religious parties already agreed on a ceasefire, and they have no issue. In fact, if the government of Netanyahu tomorrow fell down, and the opposition are able to form a government, the religious party will go with the secular. The main concern of the religious party is two things. Will not go to the army, no draft in the army, and give us money. If you give the religious parties exemption from the army, which was given from the time of Ben Gurion, from the time of Ben Gurion until this war, this was given, not negotiable, that those people are not drafted into the army. Now, it's a subject of discussion for the past few months, and now the Supreme Court said the army has to start drafting them. And that's very dangerous. So those people are willing to cut deals with the secular. So who is only standing against all of this? Again, it's those two individuals and their 14 members in the Knesset. What's the second red line? We will not allow the Hamas people to go to the north, because they are telling the Israeli public, we have cleaned the north from Hamas, which is absolute nonsense, because there are operations that happen in the north, and the Israelis have to go back and send more troops to the north. But he's saying, basically, we want the north to be cleared of them. The third red line is that we will keep the so-called net stream area, which divide North Gaza from the middle and the south. That the Israelis want to keep troops there. They may withdraw from the major cities, but they want to keep control there. And they want to keep control, the other points, on the Egyptian borders, so that the other point also, they will not allow arms to come back from Egypt to Hamas. Of course, when he mentioned this on the eve of negotiation, Lebed said, what's the point? Why you are saying this now to make it difficult to get this thing ongoing? Now, Lebed is not stupid. He knows why he's saying this. Because he wants to protect his back. If he can get this deal without committing himself to ending the war, he will achieve a few things. One thing is he will relieve the pressure from within by getting some of the hostages out. So Hamas will release some of the hostages, and he will have some of the relief from the families of the hostages, from the politicians and the opposition, and so on and so forth. Secondly, he will keep Smotrich and Ibn Gfir in check. Thirdly, and most important, is that he will buy time. All what Netanyahu needs to do now is to buy time until the American elections. And that's his biggest objective. Of course, وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. This could really flip on his head, on his own head. But that's the thinking. If I can stay in the government, stay in prime minister, buy time until the American election, Trump will come, and then I no longer have American pressure on me. This, by the way, explains why he went on a rant a few weeks back saying the US is not delivering weapons to us. The objective of it was to really give Trump more support among the Jews in America when it comes to voting. There was an article, I think, in either in Haaretz or the Jerusalem Post saying, we should stop telling the Jews how to vote in Europe and the US. But the objective of Netanyahu was really to give edge to Trump. The Biden is holding weapons from us. He kept saying, give us the tools and we will finish the job. Why the US is taking this stand and putting us on the spot and not giving us the weapons? We need it now, and so on and so forth. Again, this message was not to the Israeli public only, but to the Jews in America: vote for Trump. Again, if you read the Israeli media, they said that there were 4 countries that were happy with the debate between Trump and Biden. Of course, it was disastrous for Biden and the Democrats. Biden was a dead man talking and walking, or at least barely talking even. They said Russia was very happy because Russia wants Trump. Trump is a Russian asset. China wants Trump. And guess who else wants Trump? They said Israel. This is the Israeli media. I mean, they are not hard. They say that those 3 countries are very happy with the debate in this regard, because basically that goes with his own agenda. It's not in the best interest of the country. Again, you might be surprised, how could a person like him take a country for a ride, a whole country? He is taking the whole country for a ride. So now they are saying, okay, what's your point? Well, you know what his point, but it's politics, so they have to expose him. You are saying, this at this point, so you do not really want the hostages. No, he wants a deal. Netanyahu wants now a deal. Before, we said Netanyahu does not want a deal. But now there's too much pressure coming from the army itself. So he wants a deal. However, he will not make the commitment to end the war in the second stage. They will keep talking, take this, drag it for a few months, and the American election will take place, and he thinks that he is off the hook. For the sake of time, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring the khair and the good for the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to alleviate the suffering from the Muslims all over the Muslim world, and especially in Gaza and Rafah and Palestine. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give hidayah to those who do not know about this deen. Allahumma ameen. And inshallah, we'll see you next Sunday.